Hey, it's syndicated radio talk show host, author, singer Al Cole, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. I come from CBS Radio. My shows are nationally syndicated, and I've helped pave the way to treating women, guys too, with the dignity that they deserve. And I treat a lot of people with dignity because they treat me with dignity right from the start. I'll tell you, I've been blessed with national publicists, book publishers, agents who bring me their clientele to the show. And from there, boy, it really builds. And about 300 people every year come to my show, People of Distinction. So, man, I feel honored. And we return the honor with great interviews and a great network to air these interviews on, Apple's iTunes Radio Network, under their special News Talk provision. They air CBS shows as well as shows from NPR, National Public Radio, BBC shows, Fox News, everything. And we love that. So I feel very, very, very blessed. And I also have my own radio network called the Al Cole People of Distinction Broadcasting Network. And not only does that feature my show, People of Distinction, but it features the talk shows of other like-minded talk show hosts for extra feature for them as well. And one of my talk show hosts, a good friend of mine, the actress Dee Wallace. Dee Wallace is the actress who starred in one of the biggest films ever, Steven Spielberg's E.T., the extraterrestrial. Well, we've all seen that one a few times. Dee Wallace played the mother in that film, got the starring bill. And Dee is always out there doing new films. She's always in there every week on my radio network with her talk show classic called Conscious Creation. Love consciousness here on People of Distinction. And I also am a national communications consultant. I help people framework their messages even better. And, also with the voice, everything. Some people just hire my services just to learn how to utilize their voice better. And I also teach a little bit of singing and all of that stuff. Whoa. And I'm also, this is the interesting thing too, with my People of Distinction Humanitarian Awards. I even have a national awards event out there in the real world. I put that together 2013, and boy, I really feel blessed by that. Because we honor humanitarian and creative unsung heroes in our world, individuals as well as organizations that are reaching out to the betterment of the people around them. And to date, we've honored a slew of nearly 100 national and international unsung heroes. And that's not just in New York, certainly in New York, but also on Capitol Hill with members of the U.S. Congress attending. And we've been featured by Congressman Rob Whitman of Virginia. And coming up, we have another great event in Florida. Yeah, sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. And that's Friday the 13th of April. So get your tickets now. They're available on my website, peopleofdistinction.org, only $50. So if you want to attend, we're also going to be honoring a lot of the heroes from Hurricane Irma. Tremendous hurricane, big tragedy. However, it could have been worse, and maybe one of the reasons why it wasn't, not just the weather conditions, but also the heroes behind the scenes, ones that helped during that period of time, help people get to safety, and might have even saved a life or two. So we're going to be honoring some of them, and we're going to also commemorate the tremendous tragedy that happened in Parkland, Florida, with 17 younger people killed. And we're going to have a lot of younger people there, and particularly some high schoolers who are going to be talking it up, speaking their mind in a panel discussion. And we've been so impressed, and when I say we, I'm talking about most Americans, with the way that high school kids, have responded so well to major mass media, the questions and their answers, people right in Parkland. And so we're going to have a lot of the high schoolers there, and they're going to be just as articulate. We love that. And if you want to get out and, reach me through email, I'll tell you the email address. You're going to love it. alcoholholic@gmail.com. And you heard me right. That's ALCOLEHOLIC at gmail.com. And I really want to thank my CBS radio listeners for coming up with that handle, Alcoholic. Yeah, it seemed like from day one, my listeners have been saying, Al, we love what you're doing there, brother. In fact, we're hooked on it. We're alcoholics. And I'm also a published author with Chicken Soup for the Soul. Chicken Soup for the Soul is distributed by Simon & Schuster, a CBS affiliate. So we keep it in the family that way. Coming up, we got a lady who's doing fantastic things. And all of my guests are doing fantastic things. And this lady is doing fantastic things in Atlanta, the home of Emory University. I have a lot of people who have been involved in what I do over at Emory, professors, the CDC. Atlanta is one of the big spots for people of distinction these days. And this lady's name is Frankie Holbrook. Wonderful woman who has a great organization. It's called Shine His Light Ministry. And we need more of that in our world. That spiritual touch. Very, very important. We are spiritual creations. And we need to shine that light on each other's heart and soul. If we don't do that, well, we run into a lot of the conflicts that we've had in 2017. And we want a more harmonious 2018. And Frankie is one of the great light directions that we can take here. Shine His Light Ministry. Now, get this, she's also a rapper. Whoa! She's into music, everything. And one of the things that she really helps out with in terms of helping to prevent human trafficking. Particularly, it's big in Atlanta because Atlanta has the biggest airport around, and a lot of people get through that way. Human trafficking is a big deal around the world. Even in this country, I have a lot of people who've come on the show talking about the scope of human trafficking, and it's a super big business. And we want to end that super big business, and particularly in the Atlanta area. And Frankie is doing her part with that. So we're going to be talking about it all here. And if you want to talk to Frankie directly, you can do it through her website. Make contact here. Go to shinehislightministry.com. Welcome, Frankie, to People of Distinction with Al Cole. It's a pleasure to have you on today. How are you, Frankie?
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Al. And it's so funny because you have the alcoholic. And when I asked Siri to remind me when I was going to call you the other day, to remind me to call alcohol, it put in alcohol, to call alcohol.
Really?
Yeah. So.
No. Oh,
and then
no.
And when I saw your email, I just thought that was funny. But
How do you like
so
that?
good to be here. So good to be here. So
excited. The funny thing, too, is that another lady who was on the show, I don't know, maybe a week ago or something, she has some sort of real special app that even when we called I called her at a certain point, because it was just scheduled that way. Usually people will call me, but she actually preferred that I call her. So I called her, and she told me later that my ID, and this is telephone, came up alcoholic. Now that is crazy stuff because I know that ain't my real name, and it was. But she had this special sort of app that I don't know. It just snuck behind, and maybe it's linked to digital media in some way, or maybe even, of course, email addresses. And I was shocked. Whoa. But see, the people around me, the ones that I associate with, they know where it's coming from usually.
Yes, they're not thinking it's an alcoholic calling.
That's right. Hey, and I'm so happy with that. So this is a great way to break into a wonderful show here. Now with Frankie. All right. So I'm Al Cole, and I have this handle, alcoholic at gmail.com. You're Frankie, and that's a different sort of handle with a woman. Tell us, before we even get into Shine His Light Ministry, a nice break here into the levity. Now, is that short for Francis or Francine or something, or is it just straight out Frankie? And being Frankie, I know that you've said that some people even call you Frank, and and they look around, and they say, "Wait a minute, is this the same Frank that I thought I was talking to?" So, is that something you had all of your life? Being called Frankie?
Yeah, well, it's actually my first name, Frankie, and I was named after my grandfather. And my dad did not like Frankie, so in elementary and high school, I was Lori, which is my middle name. But then when you go to start working or you go to college, everybody calls you by your first name because they don't know you. So everyone started calling me Frankie, which I love. And so I love going by that name. And people will expect, a guy to show up, and then this short little blonde shows up, and my kids call me Frank. So whenever they're talking about me, they'll, is Frank coming? And then, of course, I don't look like a Frank.
That's right.
So it's Frankie. It's not short for anything. No, just IE.
Isn't that something? And we love that. We love the name here, Frankie Holbrook, and particularly the name that is attached to the work that you do, Shine His Light Ministry. When did you start that? And tell us some of the things that you do with Shine His Light Ministry.
Yeah, so Shine His Light Ministries, it came about April of last year. We're not quite a year old yet. I had a call from God just to, nudging me to get out on the streets, go and work with the homeless, provide necessities to them, go out and minister to them. So I started doing street ministry on a regular basis. So I go to the darkest places where there's suffering, sadness, there's addiction, there's prostitution, drugs. I go under the bridges in Atlanta. I just came back from Skid Row, which is one of the most, destitute places, dangerous, suffering places in the U.S. right now. And just basically, want to shine His light anywhere where there's darkness and go and minister to these folks and give them a little hope, right? That's what we all need, is little hope.
You got it. And I love that. And a little hope, a lot of hope, some sort of hope we need in our world, because hope is related to love, people. Where there's love and hope, well, there's real life. Real life begins on the inside, as Frankie knows. With your work, now this is tremendous, where you go to what you described to me in another chat off air, the Bluff, a very disadvantaged area in Atlanta. Tell us about that. And some people would even ask you, as a woman particularly, aren't you afraid? Tell us a little bit about when you go in there, and you have such a great presentation of yourself. I'm sure it just works so tremendously. You're able to attract people to that positive element. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there with the Bluff in Atlanta.
Yeah, and that was part of my call. That was, specific. God spoke to me specifically about that, and I really haven't shared that with anyone other than you now. But it was specific, to go there, to shine His light there. That is, it is the largest open air drug market in the U.S. It is the prostitution and heroin capital of Georgia, and we are set to change that. We want to change that. We want to turn that around. We want to clean that area up. Our representative, Mabel Thomas, she's renamed the place the Beloved, and we want to do some outreach over there. I'm partnering with Maximum Impact Love and Drew Sewell, who are a very large group, and we're going in there and we'll have an event with about 3,000 people in May, and I'm like right in the midst of planning that now. And then I go out there on Saturdays and Sundays. I do church out there. I did Christmas in the Bluff this past Christmas and took toys and coats and blankets and you name it, and food, and just went out there and tried to be a blessing to those folks. But then Maximum Impact is, of course, allowing us to do it on a much larger scale because they have the resources to do that. So it's, and Drew, who runs Maximum Impact, said God gave him that word to go over to the Bluff. So it's almost like, God has all of these positive energies pointed toward there. And so I'm just hoping that we can make a huge impact. The place is really, it's really scary. It's, it's dangerous, and it's rough area, but there's so many good people there, and there's so many people that want better lives. And they're just stuck living in that chaos. So I'm just hopeful, and I know that God will show up and show out at our event and throughout this year, and we're going to be able to change that area. We're going to be able to shine a light over there.
I know you will. You're shining a light right now on our program, People of Distinction. And people, I want you to run to this website and really follow the tracking to that light. Go to shinehislightministry.com. And while you're at it, talking about the Bluff, I want you to talk a little bit about Skid Row, Los Angeles, and a gentleman who's doing wonderful work as well. We've got to really share this, too, with our listeners. A guy named Steve Baker, Union Rescue Mission. Now, Skid Row is possibly, and maybe you have definite information here, possibly and maybe possibly definitely the largest area of homelessness in the country, and huge disadvantage. And it's right outside of a very advantaged area. I take it to, you said San Pedro at one point, and then the way that you're describing it, not too far from Beverly Hills, the West L.A. area that's very, very affluent. How did Skid Row get started to begin with? And tell us about some of the great work that Steve is doing to help people in Skid Row.
Yeah, well, it's been around for a while. People are probably familiar with it. It's Los Angeles. It's right before you get to Beverly Hills. It's probably about 15 or 20 minutes. So I've coined it as Beverly Hills backyard in some of the campaigns that I'm doing. And so it's been around, but it has just grown incrementally, and there's been no stop because of the housing costs going up so much over that way. And so the people just can't stand it. There's kids out there. There's 2,500 folks on San Pedro and San Julian. So it's certainly the worst and highest populated area in a sense of the real estate, right? So it's such a small area congested with so many people, and 2,500 people to 9 bathrooms. So it's worse than any refugee camp that you would see. And it's just tents lined along the roads. There's animals out there. There's, they're using the bathroom in the streets. There's trash everywhere. There's a park out there where there's just syringes all in the tree. There's kids. It's just, I looked at pictures and I watched Lost Angels, the documentary, to try to prepare myself. But there was nothing that you can do to prepare yourself for that type of suffering. And, I tried to use my camera out there. The tensions are high. It's very scary and it's not safe at this point. Steve Baker runs the Union Rescue Mission out there, and they have 1,250 people in the Union Rescue Mission. And I call Steve Baker a modern day disciple, because when he walks through those streets, everybody knows him. Everybody is warm to him. And you can just tell he is doing the work of God out there on those streets and in the Union Mission. Certainly one of my heroes, and he's out there in it every day. So he's on the front lines with one of the worst areas in the nation, I would say, comparable to, any. And what gets me, Al, is the polar opposite of, you drive. I was at Skid Row, and then you drive over to Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills. Completely different, night and day. So it is mind-boggling for sure.
That's right. And, I've got to make a reflection at this point, people, as I do on People of Distinction. And this goes out to you, my listening audience right now, my people. Do you realize that this paradox that Frankie's talking about right now, and the wonderful work that Steve Baker is doing to reach out to the people of Skid Row, the paradox of Skid Row being so close to Beverly Hills. Everybody knows Beverly Hills. And I'm going to put it this way. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Now, some people are going to say, Al, boy, an interesting question, but how does it fit in here? I'm going to tell you how it fits in. Now, guess what? We were talking about suffering. We were talking about the Bluff in Atlanta and very disadvantaged people and homeless people and people, strung out on drugs and people who just don't even have a buck to their name sometimes. Now, get that, people. And then we're talking now about Skid Row, Los Angeles. Completely different part of the country. But we know that homelessness is all around the place. It's around this country. It certainly is in other countries, particularly Africa, Asia. Now, guess what I mean by what came first, the chicken or the egg. Some people in our society, well, they point the finger and they say, well, these people, they just can't help themselves. They've gone down the wrong pathway. And of course, what can we do? Of course they're going to end up in Skid Row. Of course they're going to end up in the Bluff. Of course they're going to end up with drugs. Of course this, of course that, of course everything. And you know what? In one way, if we just stuck to that superficial way of seeing it, oh yeah, of course you're right. But of course you're not right. Because really, everybody in Beverly Hills, everyone on Rodeo Drive, there but for fortune, could go down the same way. People, we are born babies. And I love to say it this way on People of Distinction. Nobody comes out of that birth canal at the mature age of 21, if that's even mature anymore. No, we come out as babies. And every single baby is saying the same thing. Wow, I'm here. I'm alive. I made it. The greatest blessing in the world is to be alive at all. Who knows that better than a baby? Because a baby's looking around with just love-colored glasses and saying, wow, I love everything around me. I am just so lucky to be here. Grateful. Now, if we take that baby into another sort of environment, an environment that is befitting of that baby's love for life, that baby's going to be a beautiful adult. That baby is going to live out all of the expectations and more of Beverly Hills and all of the other great societies around this planet, what we think are great. See, where do we start out, people? Has a lot to do with where we go after that, maybe even end up. I'm a believer in this. I'm a believer that we can help this planet. Essential things have to be helped first, though. We got to straighten out a little bit of starvation. Now, where does that come from? Lack of food. Yeah, but where does lack of food come from? Lack of ability to pay. A little bit of economic equity here. Yeah. No, it's not necessarily taking from the rich to give to the poor, but maybe there are other ways to do that. A little bit more love in our society, where we're talking about, in really generous ways, the human soul. Can you imagine those people on Skid Row or those people in the Bluff? If you really investigated their heart and soul, they might be some of the most beautiful people on this planet. They might be the geniuses to come. Got to give people a chance here. And if we don't level out that ball playing field right from the start and appreciate babies and the innocence of love in our lives and have a system that nurtures that, well, this stuff is just going to go on and on and on and on and on. And then a new generation is going to come up and say, well, yeah, well, that's predictable stuff. And then after that, no, we got to end this with a little bit of love. Where does that love come from? Same place it comes from for every single baby on this planet that becomes an adult. It comes from God. If we want to put that word in there, you define God your own way, people. But there's some sort of master force to all of this. Let us live in accordance to that master force, however we define it. That energy, that beautiful energy of love. It all comes down to love, people. And I think Jackie agrees with Jackie. All right. Okay. So that's all right. Frankie, Jackie, Frank, Jack, whatever. Am I making some sense here, girl?
Yes. Yes. I love it. I love it. And I get called Jackie all the time, so don't feel bad. You're not the first. But I think Jackie's just more relatable as a woman, and then the Frankie, isn't. So, but yeah, but I love what you said. Let's have a level playing ground. We don't choose where we're born. We don't choose to, be born in Beverly Hills. If we had a choice, we'd all choose to be born there. The thing about the Bluff too is that right down the street, you've got Georgia Tech, affluent kids. So what I've been seeing, and I'm going, all over the nation, and what I've been seeing, and it's been curious to me, is why am I seeing all of this? Why is God having my eyes laid on these things and on this suffering? But one thing and I think that'll be made clear at some point, but I do see that there is, in all of these circumstances, there's an affluent community right down the street. So we've got to have the level playing field. And I love it that you said, that's the geniuses may be there. We may have future winning athletes, innovators, politicians. We don't know, but we have certainly got to lift those communities up with all of our excess. And that's what we're trying to do. And the awareness that I try to bring, I work very hard at it. And we're doing 2 documentaries. I'm doing those with Ashanti Films and Antonio Moses. And those are on homelessness. And then we're doing one called Bondage on human trafficking. And we're digging really deep into that. So we're going to show actually, on the street, with folks walking the streets, with some of the human trafficking, right along with the police department here in Atlanta. Homelessness, get right up in its face, and interviews, because people have the wrong, thoughts. They have a misconception. All of these people are on drugs. All of these people are alcoholics. All of these people chose this. So I love it that you say they didn't choose it. And, we all start out as babies, and we don't want to. I didn't come out of the womb saying I want to be homeless. I want to be destitute. Mm-hmm. But so many people are one paycheck away from being homeless. Being displaced, not having anywhere to go. So it's very surprising. And with the cost of living going up, and, the paychecks are not going up with them a lot of times, these people just don't have enough to survive. And once you drop to that level, and you've been evicted out of an apartment and everything thrown out on the streets, you don't have an ID, you don't have anything. A lot of times they don't even have a car. So it's tough. It's really tough to recover from that. If you don't have family, or you don't have friends, you don't have a network that can help you out when you hit those low spots, it's really tough. So sometimes we're out there and the only hope they have. And so, we've got to be it. We've really got to instill some hope, not in just the adults and the homeless and the adults who, prostitution, human trafficking, but I work with the kids too. And we want to get in those communities, and we want to bless those children. That's definitely on my heart. And that's why we're doing things like we are with the Maximum Impact. And we worked with Mayweather Sr., Floyd Mayweather Sr. Have you ever heard of him?
I don't know who that is. Who is that?
Floyd Mayweather is the boxing champion, right? Floyd Mayweather. And Floyd Mayweather Sr. is his dad. And so well-known boxing trainer. He trained his son, and he's boxed against Sugar Ray, some of the best. So he came to Atlanta, and we hung out with him, and he is going to be doing an underprivileged boxing program, working on that. So there's a lot of good things that are coming to Atlanta, and hopefully also over to Skid Row with Steve Baker, so that we can, bring awareness to this, and in turn have folks that will, join us in the cause, join us in helping these folks and turning this around. Mm-hmm. It's an epidemic at this point.
That's right. Hey, people, the epidemic really begins with you understanding this in that beautiful viral way that you can bring to your heart, your soul, make it work all over digital media, and get it out to your websites, get it out to your friends, your family, everything, that we are part of a human family, that everybody deserves that break, that wonderful clearing of the the field right from the get-go. That that baby, that innocence of love that we're talking about, and that is the thing that we all have in common as part of a human family. And that's why I want you to run to this website again, shinehislightministry.com. We have some minutes left in the show. This is really, really just an amazing expose of what's really going out there, and we love that. Frankie, I want to take it out with a few things here, ending with possibility thinking. Human trafficking, we know, well, some people don't even know how big it is, but it's huge all around the world, and even in this country, Atlanta, parts of Florida, other areas of the country. And now, in your experience with the Bluff, with Skid Row, is there human trafficking going on there, or is the human trafficking usually in the areas where you least expected? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, in the world overall today, there's probably about 20 to 30 million people that are experiencing human trafficking on some level. And there's different levels. Human trafficking can be where it's a prostitute and one is keeping them high all day in a hotel so they can perform drug acts. And there's some freedom involved. There's some that are full on no freedom involved and they're captive 24/7, right? So there's all different levels. And then there's women that walk the street or teens that walk the streets. And so that is going on. What happens and what I've found in homelessness is my calling, right? Helping the homeless. But what happened with that is there's layers to it. So homelessness leads to a lot of the things that we see out here that become, epidemics and become, really eye-opening. The drug epidemics, homelessness is definitely a part of that. The human trafficking, prostitution, because what do these teenagers do when they run away from home and they're in an environment that they can't live, or they get thrown out, or they come out of the foster system? So all they know how to do, or they get up with the wrong crowd and they start selling themselves. So, and then they're brought into the human trafficking world or taken into it. So many different scenarios that we wouldn't have enough time to go through. But at the end of the day, yes, homelessness. And when you're down to your last dime, you're starving, you'll sell yourself to do that, to get what you need. And so that's happening not just for women, but for children that are on the streets. And there's so many children out on the streets. People wouldn't believe it, but there's so many children out there and young people out on our streets today. And so that's happening with the men too, and the boys, of course. So more and more. And Fulton Industrial, we're doing a big event out there in June. That's a hub for human trafficking, and it's from A to Z out there is what we're finding. And as I learn more and more, my eyes are being opened to things I didn't even know about. So I know that the documentary will be great too, to open folks' eyes and to bring awareness to some of those things that are happening and how they might be able to help, how they might be able to be that preventive measure that causes the girl not to get taken, or for her not to choose that kind of life, to be involved in the community. If there are teens in your community, talk to them. Don't just be the neighbor who sits inside and doesn't talk to your neighbors. We've got to really communicate. We've got to be a community. I love that you say that, and I love that you highlight that we're all in this together. We have to work together, for the common good.
Absolutely. And when you talk about so many children out there, are the children out there because of the breakdown of the family, the mother, the father, they're not living together, sometimes they're raised by a single mother who is working, can't really keep an eye on the kids, and the kids just get out there? Is that the main reason why so many kids are out there these days?
Yeah, so many things happen. A lot of them are from foster care and they can't take it and they go from home to home and end up just going out on their own. A lot of them, are suffering from abuse and molestation at home. So they're running from the abuse. They run to the street and they run into a pimp or they run into a gang or they run into somebody that certainly doesn't have their best interest at heart, takes them in, and then they do as they please. So usually it's, they're running from something or it's a foster care situation. But sometimes you do see where families, have a child that both the mom and dad are there and the child leaves. And a lot of times it's because they've started experimenting with drugs. There's a huge drug epidemic in Marietta alone, which is an affluent community right outside of Atlanta. There was 300 deaths from drug overdose in 2016, up from about 30 deaths the year before, I think. So they are saying out there that the morgues are full. And there's so many drug overdoses and heroin is taking over. So it's happening everywhere and it's touching every community now. It's not just places like the Bluff. It's the suburbs. It's getting outside those walls, and so it's everywhere. And so none of us are exempt from these things happening to us or us being affected, somebody in our family or someone in our inner circle being affected by these things.
That's right. Do you do much rapping? I know that you told me that you do rapping music. Do you do much rapping when you relate to people at the Bluff or other disadvantaged people?
Well, sometimes, I'll freestyle sometimes with the guys out on the street just as jokes. But the performance, we write the Christian hip hop. So, Shining Sacrifice, I work with Time on More. I write lyrics a lot of times. And I did secular rap back in the day. And so now, we performed at historic Ebenezer on Martin Luther King's birthday for Alveda King, for Jemida Orange, for, just the who's who. It was really amazing. So we perform there. We do little things. I'm working on an anti-drug song now for a PSA and then a new song, Fade Away. So I do a little bit of that. I don't do a lot of it, but it's fun when I do. And we'll do freestyle sessions out in the street sometime just for kicks. I'll run into the occasional freestyler that's out there living on the street. So we'll have fun.
Yeah, there it is. And is some of your music on your website as well, shinehislightministry.com?
No, it's not on the website, but we're on iTunes, we're on Amazon. So one of the songs, the song we did at MLK, that we performed at MLK, is Crunk for Christ.
Yep.
And so Crunk for Christ is on iTunes, or, if you Google Frankie Holbrook, then you'll find it. And I published with Time on More, with Living Sacrificed Outreach Ministries. We do a lot of stuff together. So that's out there. And then the new anti-drug song will be out, and hopefully as a national PSA is what our hopes are on that one.
Yeah. Now we're going to wrap it up with some possibility thinking, and this is how I wrap up all of my shows, with kind of like an encapsulation of both the information and the spirit of any interview that I do, in terms of what if this became mainstream in our society, something that the guest was talking about, and sometimes in reverse. And this time it's going to be in reverse. All right, so let's say at a certain point in our human family development, a few years from now, let's hope, we ain't got no more Skid Rows. We ain't got no more Bluffs. People who are attuned to the human family and to love have just, they've masterminded this world to some extent. I'm not talking about utopia, but I'm just talking about something that is predictable here. It's certainly possible to get people now into that love phase. Why? Well, because it's natural anyway. Even if we put it to the back burner, now we have a society that, hey, it's more up front. We realize the baby within. We realize that beautiful innocence of love. Our school systems are going down that pathway. And people are staying together more. The family structure is tighter again. Now, if we go down that pathway And now you mentioned Albia King. You didn't mention Naomi, but Naomi's part of this too. Naomi King,
Yes,
Martin Luther
yes.
King, and now so we start to live out the content of our character. We start to live out real love expressions and directions in our lives. And it gets into the society. And now we have a different sort of society. Now, let me ask you the question here. And unfortunately, we only have no more than 2 minutes for your answers to such a deep question. What kind of world is that going to look like that it doesn't look like now, Frankie?
It's going to be bright.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to shine, and I'm going to tell you, we're all going to be closer for it, and we're all going to be blessed because we are going to be blessed by these people that we bring into the light. We are. They're a blessing. Most of them are happier than we are some days, and they know the Bible better than I do. So I just can't help but think that it would be a brighter, more peaceful, and a more blessed place to be and place to live.
And it certainly would be. And, I'm going to add my 2 cents to that. Great sense that our guest Frankie is expressing. We're going to be living in a world where we invent a new phrase. The old phrase was, be the very best that you can be. Not a bad phrase. The new phrase is, be the very best that somebody else can be. Now, get to that, people. And you know what? The irony is we don't need to invent it. It's already there. In our best love relationships, we always try to reach out for that other person's interests. When that person is our husband, our wife, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, whatever. But there's love there. Could be the child. Could be the mother, father, best friend. And we love that person. And we say, even if we don't say it directly to them in these ways, but we say it to our heart, our soul, how can I serve that person better? I love that person. I want the best for that person. I want that person to go down that beautiful pathway of a glorious life. And I even put that person above me, that interest of that person above my own interests. Whoa. We do that anyway, people. In our finest love relationships. Now, could we do it more? Oh, absolutely. And let's do it more in that possibility world that we're just delineating right now. And we can do it by honoring whatever love capacity we have within. Get to know ourselves a little bit more, people. If you take some alone time, revisit some of the love that you've given, the love that you've received, you're going to be surprised. You're going to say, you know what? Life has been better to me than I even thought. And think about maybe somebody in your childhood. Maybe somebody in your childhood you haven't seen for maybe since your childhood. And say a prayer for that person. Just randomly. Whenever you say a prayer, include that person in there. And I bet you maybe some of that light will come back to you. Because maybe that person needs that prayer at that point. Maybe you're that person's angel at that point, if we want to put it that way. And that person is saying to the person closest to him or her, all of a sudden, I feel lighter. All of a sudden, things are going a little bit better in my life. And maybe they might say, I wonder if an angel is praying for me. You're that angel. And that person doesn't have to know who you are. You don't even have to know if that prayer gets to that person. But you might know because maybe you'll feel lighter. Maybe things will get better for you too. And see, if we do that, say a prayer not just for the people that we love and not just when we're in trouble, but say it sometimes when we're at our best. And pray for somebody that we don't know or that we lost contact with. And see what happens there, people. Possibility thinking. Maybe that's one of the ways we can make this possibility happen through prayer. And that's how we talk on People of Distinction with Al Cole, and especially when we have a wonderful, wonderful guest like Frankie on, Frankie Holbrook. And you've got to support this lady. Go to shinehislightministry.com and get involved because it's everybody's direction here to help each other out. And we can help each other out, certainly, with shining his light on everybody else. So let's do that. ShineHisLightMinistry.com. Thank you so much, Frankie, for being my special guest. This has been just wonderful. I'll invite you back anytime for updates. Thank you so very, very much, Frankie.
No, thank you, Al. You're such a pleasure, and I just enjoy it, and I love all of your insights, and just so grateful for you to allow me to come on and speak about some of these things. Humbled for sure.